participants from the energy world, dear colleagues, dear shareholders.
Öncelikle hepinize
First of all, I'd like to welcome you all and wish for the success of this very session. Today, we have 4 panelists. They will deliver their speeches and presentations. I would like to thank you, and I would like to welcome each and every one of you, dear panelists. Turkey, in recent years, is the world's and Europe's focal points, and the developments both at home and abroad have created an enthusiasm and interest among our friends and among our colleagues. And Turkey has made some important developments in the energy sector, which is drawing the attention of Europe as well as the world. Developments in the field of energy. While following up the developments, the global players, nearly all of the global players, cannot ignore Turkey, which is a huge energy-consuming country. So today, we will be speaking about the opportunities regarding VPPs in Turkey's energy sector. We have a fast-growing economy, and we have an industrialized structure, and there is an increased need for energy. Between 2002 and 2017, electricity consumption in Turkey has been doubled. So, the need for energy, as you may know, is quite significant, and it is continuing to be so. And when we follow up the developments in order to protect ourselves from unwanted surprises, Turkey will continue to be a huge energy-consuming market. So, energy production resources, their diversification and their sustainability is very significant for us. Today, I'm sure that regarding Turkey's energy portfolio, you heard opinions and presentations, and the role of wind in Turkey's energy sector is explained to you and discussed with you. You took notes of the developments in Turkey and the situation in Turkey. I, myself, have completed both academic and commercial studies works in the field of wind energy, so I'm following the developments in the sector very closely. And my duty also requires doing so, and now I'm a part of a huge company which has put its signature to electricity generation in Turkey. Electricity Generation Corporation contributes a lot to the generation of electricity. So we are not only bystanders, but we are a part of this game. So we have a lot to say regarding wind and wind energy. Energy production capacity, when compared to other primary energy resources, we can say that there is 7.7%, and 7,000 megawatts of installed capacity is there in our country. However, our ministries' planning and works, we can say that we can have an extra 1,000 megawatts of wind power plants that can be run, that can be installed in Turkey. Within 10 years, 10,000 megawatts of VPPs are planned to be established. This is a huge market for Turkey, as well as a huge market for the world. When we are talking about employment opportunities, this issue should be underlined. If we are speaking about installing 1,000 megawatts of wind power plants per year, we can speak about significant opportunities. We have completed our works, we have completed our preparations, both offshore and onshore wind power plants and their installation and passing to the installation stage. All the works, efforts have been completed, and we will be ready before you with our YECA soon, Renewable Energy Resource Zone soon. So VPPs mean new employment opportunities. VPPs mean that we are no longer dependent on other energy resources when we are talking about wind. And when there is a less requirement for fossil fuel, and when we are speaking about energy input, it means that there will be a cost reduction, and it means that we're playing in a field which enables investments. If we are only to operate VPPs, these figures, these numbers are very interesting. However, but we should not be interested only in the commercial part of that business. We should be involved in the engineering and development stage. Now we went beyond self-sufficiency, but we are selling 40% of our blade and concrete structures. This should be reflected in other resources, other technologies as well. In energy sector, when we are speaking about bottlenecks, I mean, which prevents production or generation, the weak points of generation, we are exerting every effort to eliminate it and to make it possible in Turkey. I think this should be followed by the public sector as well as private sector. Regarding energy generation, Turkey's position or Turkey's rank is not a low one, is not a bad, we're not in a bad situation. But of course, we should exert every effort to improve that situation, which means creating opportunities both for Turkey, both for world, in automation, in production, and in other fields. We have so much potential to unleash, and we believe that we can increase or boost that potential. And I hope, we believe and hope that the public and private sector will do their parts. So as the state, as the government, we're providing incentive mechanisms as well. While I conclude my words, I should say that we have a lot to say, and I have also a lot to say, but today is not the day to finish all our speeches or to complete or finalize these speeches, but to start something. I want you to take into account that today we are talking about opportunities in VPPs in Turkey. So you are not here just to applaud us and go home after this conference. You are here with us to learn about the opportunities and to learn about what you can do, and you have to have your homework and you have to get your take-home message. Unless we do that, we would not reach the desired levels in the sector. So I want you to use that potential, to use the energy, and together with our shareholders, both from home and abroad, I just wish that everyone takes their part and undertakes responsibility. So I don't want to take much of your time and complete my words. Now I would like to invite our speakers, distinguished panelists, to deliver their speeches and presentations. I just want to introduce each and every panelist to you in detail. However, in order to use time more efficiently, I would like to invite the panelists to introduce themselves. Andriy Konichenkov, Ukrainian Wind Energy Association.
Mistake on pronunciation, but it's your turn, sir.
Please, my presentation. Yes. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear organizers, dear Mustafa, Serdarta 7. First of all, I wish to express my gratitude for the opportunity to participate in such a great international event at the 7th Turkish Wind Energy Congress. Before presenting the attractiveness of the Ukrainian wind energy market, I would like to give brief information about the current status of wind energy sector in Ukraine. Wind energy ranks first among other types of renewable energy source for its efficiency in generating electricity in the country. According to the official statistics, the total installed wind power capacity reached 603 megawatt by the end of October 2018. At the same time, of 388 megawatt of wind capacity in reality deliver electricity to the national grid. The remaining 266 megawatt are located in the territories annexed or occupied by Russian Federation. The present shows good growth rate of wind power capacity in the country. By the end of the year, we expect new 120 megawatts to be added to grid, while in 2019 additional 270 megawatt. As I have just mentioned, wind energy shows good results of production of electricity. These charts demonstrate installed capacity and electricity generation by all types of renewable energy source in Ukraine. With a share of only 23% of total installed renewable capacity in Ukraine, the share of wind power in green electricity generation comes to nearly 43%. Based on my 25 years of experience in renewable energy field, I'd like to stress that renewable energy development is successful when there is a state support and political will in the country. Ukraine is the country where state support for the wind industry exists. The main driving force remains the existing feed-in tariff system. Feed-in tariff is valid till 2030 and pegged to euro to mitigate the risk of inflation. The premium of 5 or 10% on top of green tariff rate is applied for the used Ukrainian equipment at the wind farms commission till end of 2024. When speaking about the legislative framework, the following recently adopted laws should be mentioned. The law of Ukraine of electricity market, adopted last year, provides for 2 years transition period for implementing completely new for Ukrainian market segments, day-ahead market, intraday market, bilateral contract market, balancing and ancillary services market. With respect to renewables, the law introduced responsibility of the producers of electricity from renewables for the hourly imbalances at the day-ahead market where they will sell electricity and green tariff. Responsibility for solar and wind generators introduced gradually with increase by 10% annually, starting with 2021 until 2030, with 20% tolerance for wind. The producers of electricity from renewables, which have commissioned their power plants before the bill entry into force, are exempt from liability from imbalances until 2030. It also envisages the possibility of signing pre-PPA before construction start when a producer of electricity from renewables has secured land, obtained a construction permit, and signed a grid connection agreement. The law of Ukraine on environmental impact assessment came into force in December 2017 and introduced mandatory environmental impact assessment for wind project and establishing a clean procedure with fixed timelines involving public consultation. Environmental impact assessment should be carried out prior to the issuance of any permits authorizing relevant activity. One more key draft bill is now under discussion in the country. It's a draft bill introducing auctions system in Ukraine. The first hearing by the parliament is expected still this autumn. According to the draft, the new support system will be introduced from 1st January 2020. Auctions to be held twice per year. Solar power plants with plant capacity exceeding 10 megawatt and wind power plants with planned capacity exceeding 20 megawatt are obliged to participate in the auctions. It will be Dutch reverse auctions with the maximum price not exceeding feed-in tariff rate. The winner will conclude PPA for 20 years. The current green tariff system will remain unchanged for the already commissioned solar and wind power plants. Investors which have already signed pre-PPA or will sign by 1st July 2019 will be eligible to the current system of renewable energy support. The graphs represent statistics on the growth rate of national cumulative installed wind capacity from 2010 through 2020. In 2020, cumulative wind power capacity is expected to grow by nearly 3 gigawatts. As I have already mentioned, Ukraine has excellent wind power resources to ensure the development of large wind projects. The Carpathian and South regions of Ukraine have the best wind resource in the country. Naturally, the wind development covers territories of these regions. Currently, the Zaporizhia region is leading in terms of installed wind capacity. In 2017, the wind power capacity also increased in the Kherson, Mykolaiv, and Lviv regions. These charts represent the current and expected installed wind capacity by regions. And the last slide of my today's presentation is devoted to our members. Thank you very much for information.
Mr. Konichenko, thank you very much for the presentation, but we would like to hear about the potential opportunities that we can build a partnership between your country companies and Turkish country companies in technology or in kind of investment. So we would like to hear a little bit about that.
Thank you very much. We are ready.
That's it.
No, why? By the way, in this year, we have, it's a first project by Gurish company, install wind farms, 32 megawatt in Odessa region. By the way, it's the first foreigner investors in Ukraine. And now we have some projects from another Turkish company. I don't remember about solar too much. And in wind, Atlas Energy company, now, by the way, this is partners Gurish, have some 2 projects in the West Ukraine. And we have some EPC contractor from Turkish side, It's a very good experience. Some project together is Turkish company. Welcome in Ukraine.
Tabii bunlar duymak istediğimiz şeyler.
These are the things that we want to hear, indeed.
Chenkov. As he said, we started to work with Ukraine till 7 years. So we are very happy to be in your country. Thank you very much.
Tabii
Ukraine is not a country that is very open to outside, so we are very proud that the first foreign projects are under partnership with Turkey. So while we are working in our own market, own domestic market, we have made great strides and we found a position in the world. So with good companies, with good level of know-how, we have started to use them in the world markets and evaluate them in the good markets. It's very important to approach to the situation from this perspective as well. Regarding supply safety, security, we take measures, but we can say that Turkey is not the only market, is not the single market. So engineering companies and other relevant companies should take it into account. So we would like to thank the sincere approach from Ukraine, and he also welcomed all of us to Ukraine. So we would like to thank Mr. Konichenko once again. Again, we have a foreign panelist, Miguel Ferreira from Portugal, a board member of Megajoule company. So he's going to give us a very relevant example. So local companies, we say that local companies should also serve abroad, which will be benefit to our country. But we also think that good companies, good foreign companies should come here and work with us in Europe, in Turkey with us. So Mr. Ferreira is a very good example to this.
Presentation, please. Go ahead.
So, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. First, I would like to thank the organization for inviting me to talk a little bit with you. And to say, just as the chairman has just told you, the idea of this presentation is to talk a little bit or open some possibilities in everybody's minds about other markets. We have heard about Turkey all day, so for the end of the day, we'll try to speak a little bit about other markets, and I will use a little bit. It's not an exhaustive presentation, just getting used a little bit of our experience in some markets and where could be good opportunities for the Turkish and other companies to invest. First, I would like to just introduce what is Megajoule very briefly. So this Megajoule is an engineering company starting to work in resource assessment, wind and solar, but now working in general engineering activities, in operational analysis, turbine inspections, environmental, and we have been born in Portugal. That's our country of origin, but we have now several offices spread across the world. This map shows the regional offices that we have and the countries in which have the orange, the darker orange is where we have been working very much, and the lighter orange, other countries that we have been working. Non-exhaustive again list of clients. We have been proud in working with very big and major companies all around the world. Some of them are Turkish, some of them from other regions. In all these countries, we have been working in more than 40 countries around the world. Of course, that's why we are here. We also have an office in Turkey. We have a partnership with a Turkish company named WindThink, so we have complementary services and working together to serve the developers and the financial institutions and investors in the Turkish market. So we have performed several wind resource assessments for wind farms in Turkey for some of the companies, and we are very pleased to be here working for this very nice country. Okay, so about markets. Everybody knows, and I will pass by, I've seen talk about this in the morning, the mainstream wind markets. Everybody know China, US, Germany, Spain, now Brazil also a big market. Turkey, fortunately, is there in the part of in the right side, the top 10 of the new installed capacity. We can see Turkey in the top 10, not yet in the cumulative capacity. Myself, I have a little bit missed the time when I say that Portugal was on the top 10, but for a small country like us, it was not possible for very long. I will divide in regions this presentation about countries. As Portuguese, we have a very good presence in South America, in Latin America. You know, the language is an advantage for us. Everybody speaks or Portuguese or Spanish, so it's very good for us. And Brazil is now our strongest markets. We are now working also in Argentina. But please let me say, I will talk and focus my presentation in new markets. So Brazil and Mexico, for example, are the biggest and mature markets in South America. But there's not probably where the biggest opportunities are, because the market is very well developed, very mature, a lot of big players. And I will focus in new markets and draw attention to new opportunities. So I will start saying about Argentina. Argentina started an auction system in 2016. And it started very fast. The new government in 6 months put an auction system online, and they made the first called Renovar. Renovar, it's a game of words in Spanish. It's come from renew and AR from Argentina. So they got that name, and they started in 2016. The first round, they have planned 1,000 gigawatts per year, but in the first rounds, 1.5, which is an intermediate new round that they put through, and round 2, they have already granted 2.5 gigawatts. So now the challenge is to finance and build those projects. So the speed slowed a little bit, but there is planned, with this missing this information about the average price, $50 per megawatt hour. So it's all the auction systems putting the price down, but very competitive. And as I mentioned, they speed down a little bit, but there will be a third round of Renovar program. They called it a mini REN. This is a small Renovar, because it's focused on projects up to 10 megawatts. So there's planned the new 400 megawatts for the beginning of 2019. And the plan, as they say, the target is 1,000 megawatts per year. And we expect that the market will be very interesting in the next few years. Another market, and this is a new one, completely new, everything is to do. So for those who like to start with greenfield projects, this is very good. Colombia, there's a very important political will. They started a renewable energy plan. The first auction is planned for the beginning of 2019. It was January, but I just read today, after preparing this, that it probably will be a slight delay to give more time for the interested people and companies to prepare. And their planning is to tender 1 gigawatt between wind and solar on the first auction. So the market will start and big, and it's a very interesting region, a stable country in South American terms. And everybody is looking very, very, with a lot of interest for Colombia. The estimated wind potential is around 20 to 30 gigawatts, which is nothing. Today, I see with the technologies in wind, it's possible to get good potential for moderate wind sites. And I will show you 2 maps from colleagues of us that's publicly available wind maps. And you see Colombia on the right, this moderate wind resource, apart from that part called La Guajira in the northeast, which in the north, that is very, very windy. But comparing with Argentina, Argentina has much better wind resource, but most of them is in areas in the south of Argentina where no one lives there, so it's very hard to transport the electricity to the populated areas. But there is opportunities, there are very interesting markets. Another region that is now being very interesting is North Africa. And in North Africa, I will select 3 countries to say. Morocco, which is probably one of the best wind resources in the world. There are 6 gigawatts expected until 2030. The rhythm is relatively slow. The tenders that have been in the past are very bureaucratic, take a long time, but the things are going on. The projects are underway. There is a good development. There is also a relatively stable framework, and it is possible to do some things. Egypt, there's a very good wind resource again also. The regulation and the legal framework is not so clear, and things are going a little bit up and down, but there is a 2 gigawatts plan under development and the target of 20 gigawatts up to 2035. So there's a lot of room for projects also. And finally, on a smaller scale, Tunisia. Tunisia is normally considered the most European of those North African countries, and which it's good in terms of regulations and legal issues. There is small projects compared with the others, as the country is smaller. There is a tender going underway for around 500 megawatts. Some of them are big projects, around 120, 200 megawatts, but there are also projects up to 30 megawatts with local developers trying to get the license, and then they probably will need partners, and that's why I think that's probably one of the opportunities for Turkish companies, wherever it will be as a financial partner or as a technical partner, depending on who is on the other side. I think it's a possibility. This map shows, again, a publicly available wind map showing the very nice wind resource of all the region. Southeast Asia, that is a more challenging market. It's a little bit new. For us that are in the other corner of Europe, it's a faraway market and a little bit different in terms of culture and everything. Probably you are closer, so you might be moving around better than us, but it's very interesting, very dominated by the Chinese culture, but also wanting to go away from Chinese influence. So there's opportunities on that. And the most spoken of these countries is Vietnam. They have a target of 6 gigawatts to be installed. There's everything to do again. It's a market still in infancy. I'm not sure, but I think there's no megawatts yet installed, or if it is, it's a very residual megawatt. So everything is up to do. The projects are in the early beginnings. So they need technology, they need finance, they need investors, they need expertise and how to do. There is still a feed-in tariff, which is a very rare thing in the present days. We heard about Ukraine. It's also one of the rare places where there is a feed-in tariff. This, again, a map to show you that the wind resource. Apart from Vietnam, we can pinpoint a couple of the neighbor countries like Laos, Cambodia, Thailand are also potentially interesting, but never forget Philippines and Indonesia that also are already with some developments, mostly in Philippines, but are interesting markets. Southeast Europe. For Southeast Europe, I would say I hesitated. Ukraine is central and southeast, both. But as I knew that Mr. Kononchenkov was talking a lot about Ukraine, I decided not to put Ukraine because, of course, Ukraine is one of the most promising markets to consider here. Other markets are the Adriatic and Balkans region, all former Yugoslavia and even Albania. There's small countries, but it's kind of a whole market. So they work a lot still as there was the separation of Yugoslavia, but they are still very similar in regulations, the same language. So it's more or less the same, a bigger market, and it works well for that. Croatia and Serbia are already more established markets, but there are very good opportunities in countries like Macedonia, Montenegro, Kosovo, and even Albania. They are taking off, first projects being constructed, so it's a very interesting situation, and I know that there is a lot of good relations, Turkish people with a lot of the people in that region. I know a lot of common families, so it's certainly there is good opportunities for Turkey there. Another one that is starting again is Greece. Greece also have been a mature market, but is coming to a second wave of development. And it's mature, it's European Union country, so it's stable, it's a Eurozone, so financially it's very stable, even if it was not so stable for Europe standards in a couple of years, but it's still a good opportunity. They have the plans for a 2.6 gigawatt of wind and solar auctions. They just started the first one, so it will happen in the next few years. Also Romania. Romania has probably one of the biggest untapped wind potentials in the European Union. All the area of the Black Sea coast is very good, has very good resources. There were a lot of projects. We have been working there for a long time with a lot of projects. Then the laws stopped the developments of renewables. Then they are discussing that it's probably going again. So it's probably there are opportunities there. When wind and solar could meet 35%, I was not reading well, of the electricity consumption by 2030. So it's a very good development that can be done in that region. The problem is the regulatory uncertainty. So there was in times a very good, favorable law for renewables. Everybody was starting developing projects. In 6 months, they changed the law. They got back and forward. So it's this kind of uncertainty is very bad for investors and developers. Bulgaria is Black Sea coast again. It's a continuity from Romania. It means very good wind resources, but even worse than Romania, there have been some previous retroactive changes and taxes that undermined completely the investors' confidence. So the feed-in tariffs that were cut retroactively, and this is get a lot of mistrust for the markets. Finally, I will draw attention to two very special markets, Russia and Saudi Arabia. So they're both huge markets, but very complex. It's not a table of play for small fish, let's say. You need to be very big and very robust to go to these kind of markets. In Russia, they have a plan to have 3.5 giga up to 2024. Of course, the resource is much more than that. But there are two companies, Rosatom, the nuclear power company, and the joint venture between Fortum from Finland and Rusnano from Russia. They are dominating the market in the moment. From these 2.5 megawatts, I think, that are already allocated, they together have more than 2 gigawatts. So there's a residual projects for Italian Enel, I think. So there's a very concentrated markets. Probably it's very difficult to get in, but the attractiveness is very good because of the capacity or dimension of the country. Saudi Arabia, always known about oil, but they have a plan for 9.5 gigawatts of renewables until 2023. They have already started it, and they chose a kind of a system that the government pre-selects the sites and then put it in a tender. And this first round, they chose to tender 2 single projects. It was round 1 for solar for a 300 megawatts project, and round 1 for wind for a 400 megawatt project. This results in a market for very, very big players. Again, we have been working in this wind project, and the competition was fierce to get the minimum bid. I think it's a world record. The bid is around $20 per megawatt hour, the best bid. It's still not decided, but it is very, very competitive. It's a huge investment. The players there are the biggest ones that you know in the market, but I think in both these cases there are opportunities for joint ventures. I know companies that were technically available but not financially capable and went in joint venture in this contest in Saudi Arabia, for example. So the expertise, companies that know how to do the things might have always opportunities to get in these markets. So the message is wind is available around the world. So when the markets are in ups and downs, and nowadays with the auction systems going everywhere, we can see that there's a peak load in 2-3 months in a country, then it goes a peak load in another. So I think we all have to be very flexible and be prepared to act and go to an opportunity in different regions. So we have to look for it. And I give you some suggestions. As I said, it's not exhaustive. You have to study to fit the market characteristics to the company characteristics, to the investor characteristics. But I hope that this can give you some ideas and put you thinking, some of you thinking about these markets. And of course, we will be there to help you if you need. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ferreira. And I would like to have a question about your presentation. It was a very good opportunity to see all potential opportunities all over the world. But the question is, where are you in these projects? What are you doing for them? And what kind of potential partnership Turkish people can do with you? So we didn't hear this. Can you please present this also?
Thank you. I made a slight introduction about the company. I didn't want to be very commercial. We are more in some of these countries. We can help, of course, as a consultant. We're helping on development and selecting the markets, even presenting some potential players that if you are looking for joint ventures. We are not present in all these markets. You see, we are in South America. We have some important things in North Africa. Some of those markets are markets that we are also starting to look for them, like Vietnam still have some contacts, but it's a very far away market. So we are not involved in all these markets very deep, but in some of them, of course, we can help on developing the projects, on the engineering, that is our core activities, and introducing partners if possible, in some cases. I've seen, I gave an example, I didn't want to say names, but there's one of the partners in Saudi Arabia that got this joint venture. We put them in contact, so we introduced, when we know people one side or another, we can help on that.
Ümit ediyorum sektör bunları not almış.
I hope all the sector representatives noted down all the things that he said. He mentioned potential business opportunities. I hope you have taken your notes. And after the meeting, please stay here and make contact with him, and we will keep in contact with you. We're talking about business opportunities in the wind sector. We will continue with the opportunities and while searching for opportunities abroad, we should also focus on our own opportunities. And this is the representative of a firm that says Turkey has the best know-how will be speaking today. We heard about your investment in Ukraine, and we would like to congratulate you on that. Now, from Gürüş, Ali Karadoman will be making his presentation.
Merhabalar.
Good afternoon, I'm Ali Karadoman. I would like to thank the association and the ministry representatives for organizing this unique congress, because this congress is important not just about providing information, but also about putting our problems on the table and finding solutions to them. In my presentation, I will speak about new opportunities in the global market. However, Mr. Kurenchevrekov and Ferrari gave detailed information about the world market, so I will focus more on what Turkey can do in the wind field and how can we develop. First, I will speak about Gürüş domestic wind investments and Gürüş abroad investments abroad, then potential market in Ukraine and Kosovo where we have investments, and current markets in the close geography, Eastern Europe, Central Asia, North Africa, Middle East, and policies of big investors and turbine suppliers in the global market, Central and Western Europe and Central Asia. Now let me summarize, give you brief information about our company, who we are and which projects are we carrying out abroad. As Güriş Holding, we are 61 years old and we have worked in every field except for nuclear power plants. We have worked in the geothermal energy field and wind, solar, and many other fields of industry that we are engaged in. And also in steel, iron and steel, we have experience. So in multiple fields, we are trying to develop Turkish engineering and export it abroad. This way, we are trying to decrease our current deficit. And also in the field of energy, we aim to create a portfolio, and our energy branch, Mogan Energy Investment Holding, was established in 2009. And when we were established, straight away we started implementing projects about construction, industry, mining and tourism sectors. It's one of the leading firms in these fields. And from Güriş, we received immense support from Yaman Türk family who own the Güriş company. They have 60 years of know-how, and we have transferred this know-how to our engineers. Mr. Ediz, our founder, comes to work every day at 8 a.m., although he's 93 years old and he works a lot, and he says he works harder than all of us and he's younger than all of us. And also another member of the family keeps working very hard, and we have around 5,000, 6,000 employees. We had actually, but now with the recent purchasing of another firm, we have more than 7,000 employees, and we have a reliable growth strategy, and we have a strong culture of commitments, and we have activities in 10 countries, and we are trying to improve our stability, market stability, and we are trying to work harder and export more know-how abroad. When we established Mogan Energy Investment Holding, as you can see, 785 megawatts of licensed projects have been developed until 2015, and in 2016 we reached an installed capacity of 800 megawatts. How did we achieve this? We worked day and night, weekends, no holidays, and we kept working very hard, very fast, also hand in hand with the public sector. We managed to achieve success in a very short period of time. So we take pride in commissioning 3 power plants in 1 year. And we, of course, had challenges, difficulties. We sometimes thought we would fail, but with the support also from the government, we overcame some bureaucratic barriers and we achieved success. I just don't want to show slides in theory, because we received information about the world markets by the previous presentation as well. So I will try to focus more on the practical side and how we adapted our know-how into our projects. A map of Turkey, the wind power plants across Turkey are shown here. So without any discrimination between different regions, we made investments in wind energy, hydropower, geothermal power, and we have also hydro investments underway. And in Dinar, we have the second biggest power plant of the world, which has a capacity of 200 megawatts. As we made investment in Dinar, people asked us, do you know the wind power of the central Anatolia region in Turkey? Yes, we know it very well. And we have another power plant which is under construction in the field right now, again in Dinar. So in central Anatolia, we are about to complete the construction of a 300 megawatt capacity wind power plant, which will be the biggest in Turkey. So if you have will, then there is a solution. This is what we say. And as we carry out our operations activities, we always try to reinforce, strengthen our team and engineering capacity in Turkey. Of course, it means the right use of engineering. As Gürüş Construction and Engineering Limited, we attach great importance to engineering. As I graduated, I asked my professors at university, you have given us the theory, but what about the practice? What about the application? And they would tell us that we would learn about the practice in the private sector. Then, back in 1980s, it was when I graduated. Then when I asked them whether we could merge private sector with universities, the professor said it wasn't possible. So I started working in the private sector. But in the course of time, together with universities, Middle East Technical University, Istanbul University, and other universities, we joined our forces with them as a company, and we became the firm which acted as a pioneer in this field. For example, regarding wind power plant, we have one in Kosovo, more than 200 megawatts of capacity. Then in Ukraine, as Korenchenko mentioned, with his great support, we entered the Ukrainian market. We became familiar with the market first with his support, and after all of this, I would like to show you the wind power plants that we built in Turkey. In which parts of the country do we have wind power plants? We always talk about megawatts, but we prefer the capacity factor in our country. For example, for geothermal, how much of the investment has reached 90%? It's not higher than 600 megawatts. So it is the same for the wind energy. So the capacity factors in the feasibility studies are very important. This is what we are focusing on. And we know the capacity factor isn't very high, which shows there's a problem with the engineering and with the realization of the projects. So generally, feasibility is carried out on paper. Yes, theory is very important, but practice is even more important. You should be working in the field rather than on paper, on maps. You should be drawing up the maps yourself by visiting the field, and this way you can make more millimetric measurements on the field, and the capacity factors will be better. This is what everyone should do in Turkey. Actually, general engineers do everything on paper, but theory and practice should be combined, should be merged. This way, the capacity factors for the wind power plants can be achieved. And while doing all this, our utmost objective was to introduce the highest quality wind turbines in Turkey, because production isn't here in Turkey. And also for line nacelle height, for example, for one of the firms, we ask 115 meters to be built. This is the height that we selected for the nacelle, and we found it to be very useful, and the production increased by 6-7%. And how can we transfer our know-how abroad? We have the Kitka and Ovid projects in Ukraine, Kitka in Kosovo, Volovets in Ukraine, 120 megawatts project that we have. It is at the development phase, so we have a very large capacity for projects abroad. So what are our expectations from the government in the domestic power plant investments. Actually, we are here to discuss the problems and propose solutions. As Girish, we want to be a part of the solution, not the problem. If you're not a part of the solution, then you're a part of the problem. This is what we say in the private sector. We have to solve these problems in cooperation with the state. We have to present these problems to the bureaucracy and try to find solutions before we make the investments. And so what should we do? In the morning, there were very good news that we had. What are our expectations from the government in domestic investments? It is particularly important for the wind power plants. Some investors may have reservations about speaking on these topics, but we want to list our expectations. We know that capacity increase, once approved, will provide new employment opportunities, and the government officials also confirmed this demand of ours, and we hope it will be possible to increase capacity. Also, the VAT receivables which accumulate during the investments should be paid straight away. It will provide us a financial advantage. Although we have VAT incentive, we still have a high burden of VAT during the construction phase, and generally it takes 8-9 years for us to receive back for the VATs to be returned to us, and we have a very high amount of VAT that we are waiting from the government, waiting for reimbursement. So I think rather than looking for new financing opportunities, if the government pays the VAT receivables to us, I think it would help us improve the capacity. What else should we do? We should work more on the local contribution share mechanism. Nacelle production, blade production, we have started manufacturing them in Turkey, and first of all we did this for our own investments, and as Mr. Minister told us, he wants Turkish engineering to take the lead, and he wants us to make the productions in Turkey. Of course, this is a duty of us, and last year we talked about this again. The know-how, the engineering knowledge that we have should be shared through a corridor from Turkey with other Turkic states particularly, and those regions which are geographically proximal to Turkey, close to Turkey. Turkish engineers can never stay in the country. They always go wherever there is business. They go to other countries very frequently, and the local contribution share, it may be paid in Turkish liras. This is also what the minister said today, and if we increase the duration from 5 years to 7 years, maybe it would be better in terms of supporting the factories and supporting the employment. In the past, we used to purchase import blades from abroad, but now we have a blade production in Turkey. Also, we have generator production manufacturing in Turkey. We have to increase this further. And another important issue is that rules should not change during the game. This is what our president says. And before the investment, we make feasibility studies and decide on the financing, and we complete the investment this way. However, in the course of time, if the regulations change, then the feasibility will be affected negatively. As Mustafa Ataseven also mentioned before, the projects do not belong to us. They belong to the banks until the projects are completed. So we have to do the financing from our own budget, from our own pockets. So this is very important also, that the rules shouldn't change during the game. In many power plants, we see sales have begun. The power plants built by us are being purchased by foreign firms. So I think in order to prevent this, it is important that the rules stay the same. what about our activities, operations in Kosovo and Ukraine? Let me start by Kosovo. We heard about Ukraine from my dear friends, so I will focus more on Kosovo. The population, as you can see, is 1,800,000. Surface area is shown here. The capital, currency, and its neighbors are shown here. And the most important thing here is that as we went to Kosovo, there were second-hand turbines with 1.35 megawatt capacity or zero point 0.5 megawatts capacity. There were 3 turbines with this total capacity. And when our team arrived in Kosovo, and after they have taken the necessary permits, 2 weeks ago we made an opening ceremony, and it is a source of pride for us. These theoretical information, I won't focus on them. If you want, you can have my presentation later. But what is important on this table is that there is it is possible to invest in wind energy in Kosovo, but once you enter the market, you should provide the support and make quality investments. And we had 9 turbines assembled in a period of 18 months with a capacity of 32.4 megawatts. And it was for the first time that the Turkish flag, we managed to wave it in Kosovo in the renewable energy field. So we have learned about the renewable energy business, and we started investing in other countries, and we started transferring our know-how and engineering to other countries, and we achieved success and productivity in Kosovo and in Ukraine in this field. By the end of this month in Ukraine, we will commission it. The assembly has been completed, just the fiber connection. We are working on that. It will not take more than a month. So the more we go to other countries, the more ambitious and excited we become. We carry the values of Turkey to other countries, and we earn foreign currency, and we try to reduce the current account deficit of Turkey. So in our company, Mogan, is focusing more on the renewable energy resources. For natural gas, although we had our license, we stopped our operations in that field because our aim is to effectively use our natural resources. So about Kosovo, the wind energy market situation is shown here. Kosovo relies heavily on coal currently. So when we transfer our know-how, I think the carbon emission will also be decreasing in these countries. So we are present there, and we will continue to be present there. Please warn me if my time is up, Mr. Moderator. I will just make a few more points and then close my presentation. So these are our activities in Kosovo. Whether there's room for capacity improvement, the incentive mechanism in the Kosovo incentive mechanism, the total capacity allocated for wind energy is 150 megawatts until the end of 22, and this capacity has been fulfilled so far. Ukraine, I won't focus much on this because it was mentioned by the previous speakers. So what is the situation of our company in Ukraine? You can see here our target is to have a wind power plant of 200 megawatts capacity, and the renewable energy potential in Ukraine is shown here for wind and bioenergy, hydropower, solar power. There are large investments in this rare country, and we are very happy to be part of them, to be present in Ukraine, and hopefully we will complete new projects together in Ukraine. So before closing my words, I will give you a general look into the close geography, neighboring geography of Turkey. Turkey is a locomotive, actually, in our opinion. So what contribution can we make to the Turkic republics? In hydro plants, geothermal plants, we can have a role to play in the Turkic republics because Turkish companies are very successful in that. And Also, if the government officials in their bilateral meetings give an impetus to this issue, we are ready to run and to invest in them. Bosnia-Herzegovina, in Romania, Bulgaria, we can make investments. Also in Central Asia, we can make investments. We have presence in some countries in Central Asia. To sum up, for example, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, North Africa and Middle East, we have presence, and I think we can make gains, we can make profits in these countries once the bureaucratic procedures are overcome, completed, and once the Turkish firms enter these countries, then the new renewable energy fields may open up. We can offer them new opportunities, and the investments in Turkey can be transferred abroad, and we can make exports from the companies, the factories in our country. This is our duty both as an individual and as a company, and this is what we are working for. As Mogan Energy Investment Holding, with support from our holding, we are carrying out operations in Far East Asia, and there are offshore opportunities that we're interested in. We are ready to work in every field, and we take our power, strength from the Republic of Turkey. Thank you.
Ali Karaduman Bey.
We would like to thank Ali Karaduman for his presentation. The topic of our panel is the opportunities in wind energy. So evaluating opportunities abroad is good to use our domestic power abroad. So it was a very good and interesting presentation. Together here we are in the hall with government officials, so making use of this opportunity was quite successful. So our ministry, our government, our state, the superiors from government institutions are here with us, and I believe that they took their notes, and especially the part relating to that you cannot change the rules of the game in the midway. So I also took note of it. Ali Rıza Öner, Business Development Director, and Mr. Öner is coming from a German company called ICT.
Merhabalar, ismim Ali Rıza.
Good afternoon. I'm Ali Rıza Öner, Business Development Manager of ITC. Our company is responsible for solid waste management. And we have 14 electricity generation installations in 11 provinces with 160 megawatts. And I'm working as a business developer in this company for many years. And our company has its own technology, and it also is responsible for operation and maintenance itself. And we're looking for investment opportunities abroad for the last year or 1.5 years. In Africa or in our near neighboring countries, there are good developments. Prior to that, I was doing my own work. I was a freelancer. In Iran, we developed a 400 megawatts of wind installation. However, due to the current status in Iran, we came to a stop. So we're waiting. Prior to that, I assumed several roles and positions in AXA Energy. So when I combine all my experience together, I want to share my experience and my knowledge. Developing projects and making investments abroad, we have to make an in-depth preliminary analysis and research. So I'm going to talk about my own experience in my company. Wind investments actually need feed-in tariff guarantees, purchasing guarantees, they are a must. And both in the new markets, in the emerging markets, these are no longer used, but sometimes they are used for wind but not solar, for biomass but not for others. We have to study them very carefully if we are to invest. What about the duration of purchasing guarantee? After that guarantee expires, what should be done? These are important. PPAs are also very important. PPAs should be bankable. While doing these projects, there is a 15 or 20% of equities, and there is an 80% of lending from the banks or credit from the banks. So these PPAs are very important. The duration, I said the duration, and the status of the grid. For instance, with Ukraine, we were interested in Ukraine for some time, and Andrei is with us, and I'm very happy to see him once again. Energy transmission line problems, do they exist or not, should be studied. And renewable energy investments, why these investments are made there, should be studied very well. Distribution costs should be studied very well, transmission costs as well. And when we study the countries, we see some differences. Sometimes transmission and distribution costs might be very high, and incentives, investment incentives. And what about the price reductions? We have to take it on account. Geopolitical conditions, situation of the country is very important. And when you focus on some other countries, just like Iran, the biggest problem is the existing situation in Iran. So sometimes we see that countries are very enthusiastic. For instance, Africa is inviting us. However, when you install the plant, will they pay it or not? Especially some Turkish companies in their investments in Africa, not only limited to wind, they had problems in receiving payments. Inflation is important. The interest rates and the debt rate of the country, debt rate situation of the country is important, and the interest of financial institutions to the country. If we go to a country, we just need to know what are the other countries that are already investing, like EBRD, like IFC, or African Development Bank. Did they manage to receive credits, loans from these banks? These structures or not should be studied, and the interest of local banks to renewable energy projects should also be taken into account. And legislation issues, ownership law, logistic maneuvers or logistic capabilities are important. In Africa, there are some inland countries, and the transport costs might be very high. They should be studied very well. Country reports, they are available on internet, published by World Bank or published by other international organizations like German banks, French banks. These reports should be reviewed very carefully, and especially for Turkey or Turkish investors, is there any bilateral law that are protecting the investors? Do they exist or not? What about the taxation? What about the legal firms to receive support from companies abroad? They are very important. After establishing all of them, or after fulfilling all these conditions, not only all of them, but some of them, when we fulfill them, then there comes some technical issues or technical points that we need to know beforehand by a preliminary examination without having to go to that country. Wind Atlas is the most significant of them. In our projects in Iran, we work together with Megajoule, and it's a pleasure for me to meet with them here once again. They supported us. Energy transmission lines and generators and transformers.
Bunlar çok önemli çünkü
And transformers, their availability, and wind zones, wind fields, their capacities are very important. Logistic routes, logistic maps should be collected, should be studied, because when establishing VPPs, the costs are also determined by all these factors. And so maps, from Google Maps, we can identify the roads and the highways. Are there any monitoring and supervision countries? Because in Turkey, there's a very good level of know-how. We have technical staff, and they're also serving abroad. We have so many colleagues that are working in the EPC side, in the turbine side. They're working for countries abroad, studying customs legislations of relevant countries and the existence of international law offices. Are important. Local partners, exploring local partners are very important. In some countries, it's impossible to engage in business without local partners. And sometimes when you find a local partner without a preliminary examination, without preliminary exploration, it may be problematic. Sometimes in some specific countries, our projects did not go smoothly due to lack of knowledge of the local partners. Identification of risks and the direct flight by Turkish Airlines is also another important aspect, like Georgia, Russia, and like Ghana. These countries, selecting these countries, of course, we take into account whether there are direct flights by Turkish Airlines. Target countries are India, Brazil, Pakistan, Vietnam, Indonesia, Egypt, Ukraine, Russia, South Africa, Namibia, Mauritania, Taiwan, China, and the US. So these are among our target countries, and as our CEO of Megajoule and as mentioned by Ali Bey, there are common countries we have mentioned. As mentioned by Ali Bey, there is a good level of know-how in Turkey. With YEKAS, we are now, when we become capable of installing turbines, we have no problem in terms of construction or engineering, but our know-how can be used in our investments abroad. We are also negotiating with Exim Bank. Before the crisis, we had very good negotiations with third countries like UK, China, Germany. They evaluated joint projects, and by using loans from Exim Bank, both investments and IPCs are possible abroad. Thank you very much for your attention. I don't want to take much of your time. Thanks a lot.
Biz teşekkür ederiz Ali Rıza Bey.
Thank you very much, Ali Rıza.
Günün son oturumu, son dakikaları her
Today is now we are having our last session, and these are our last minutes, last moments, but we are here to listen to each and every word to be delivered by our panelists. And I would like to thank you, participants, for your attendance and for coming here and listening to us. If you have any question to our participant, please, I was going to say that please write down your questions, but now it is too late. So if you have questions after our session, we will have an opportunity to discuss them face to face together with our panelists. So to sum up our session, we have 2 foreign and 2 local wind turbine actors, players in our session. We talked about the potential in Turkey and the potential in the world, especially Russian Wind Energy Association and Ukrainian head of, I'm sorry, not Russia, Ukrainian head of Wind Energy Association, who is with us, and it was very important to hear his comments on opportunities in Ukraine. If you listen to the opportunities relating to one country, you immediately forget about it, and it doesn't mean a lot to you. However, immediately after these examples, we heard the investments of Güriş. Ari Karaduman is here with us. He talked about Güriş's investment, a very important player in our country, their investments in Turkey and their investments in other markets. We also heard the engineering aspect of that sector, both like intermediation, both in terms of using resources. We heard a presentation from a very comprehensive company's CEO, Mr. Miguel Ferreira from Portugal. He talked about their investments in Turkey and their investments abroad and connections of our country with companies abroad. And lastly, Ali Rıza Öner shared his experience with us. It was a short presentation, but a very valuable one indeed. I just want to say if you just want to add something, dear panelists, please feel free to do so. I see that you do not want to add anything more. So before declaring this session closed, I want to present our panelists a small token of appreciation. We have a document to present, but I would like to invite Mustafa Atasever, our president, to the floor to present the documents, the plaques.
Şöyle, sayın katılımcılar, bizim
Distinguished participants, we have a tradition. Our moderator is going to give the certificates to the panelists, and one of the board members is going to present the moderator with his certificate. So let's continue that tradition, or let's give the certificates together.